All right, you ready? On your mark, get set, go! This is the 3 o'clock lecture all about water. Who's thirsty out there? You come by my booth, number 509, I'll buy you a drink. Well, okay, it's a drink of water, but hey, still, it's a drink, right? So come on by. Multi-Pure is sponsoring booth 509. We have the most effective water filter in the world, and we'll give you the whole long, boring spiel if you show up there. We also have some prizes. If you go over to the booth, you get this handy-dandy little flashlight keychain. Very cute. So we got one of those for you. And by the end of the lecture, we'll see the crowd, who's got the best question or something. And I've got a free stainless steel water bottle to give away, as well as a free dessert at Wingers. Woohoo! So come have a seat and join us. Like I said, today's lecture is all about water. So I've entitled it, Water, Water Everywhere, Nor Any Drop to Drink. Does anybody know? Oh, this could be our first prize. Does anybody know where this quote comes from? Anybody know? This quote, do you know where it comes from? You can win a prize. I'll give you the stainless steel water bottle. Do you know? What? The Bible. Wrong answer, but I like the spirit of it. Yes. Moby Dick, really good answer. Wrong answer, though. Anybody else? Yes. Oh, come get your prize. I'm so impressed. Yes, this is a poem called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. It's an English poet, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Excellent. And the poem is about a sailor who obviously is out in the ocean, surrounded by water, but of course he can't drink any of it or he knows it will kill him. And that's often the dilemma, right, with water is we've got lots of it so far, but oftentimes it can be compromised. About 70% of our body is made out of water, as well as the planet is covered with water. But we also know that there can be some water disasters. So here's a quick little photo tour to show you how you can literally be surrounded by water. And these are just recent disasters, and yet not be able to drink any of that. You've probably seen this picture, famous one from the tsunami, Southeast Asia. This was Hurricane Katrina, so completely surrounded by water, but every drop of it was contaminated. Pakistan has been having floods recently, almost every year it seems like lately. Here's a really interesting picture of some farmland in Iowa that was flooded. Even Boston, beautiful Boston, I love it, and that's a really interesting picture of flooding. And when we think about our drinkable water, but all our animals, our pets are also compromised and affected by flood waters and natural disasters. So we also have to have water for them. Now, this is closer to home, at least for me. I live in San Diego, and so brace yourselves. This is pretty scary. This is the kind of water disasters in my backyard. You see, just disastrous. The lawn chair fell over. Major flooding in my little garden there in the front patio. Unbelievable calamity. All right, I'm just kidding. Actually, it did hail when I lived in San Diego. And I know I can't impress you folks here in Utah because you live in snow and hail all the time. But for San Diego, that was a big deal. And I think you're here today at the Self-Reliance Expo because the weather's going crazy. There are natural disasters all over the place. Stuff's happening. So we need to be prepared. How important is water? There are 3 items that your body needs to survive. Anybody know what they are? Our next prize for the person who can answer. What are 3 things your body needs to survive? Free dessert at Wingers. Anyone? Anyone? Nobody's even going to guess. Water, yes. Food. He says shelter. That's actually a really good guess. Air. Come on up and get your prize in the pinkish, purple, pink. Very pretty, though. There you go. That's right. Oxygen, water, food. Actually, I should have asked you even, how long can you survive without these things? How long can you survive without oxygen? Without oxygen, air. About A few minutes, like maybe 3 minutes. She says 5. Yeah, 3 to 5. I guess depends on how good you are at holding your breath. How about water? How long can you survive? Yep, 3 days. That's true. Good answer. How about food? How long can you survive without food? About 3 weeks. Me, about, till lunchtime. So those are the 3 things that we need. Now, here's sort of a overly dramatic picture of water. But I wanted to make a point in that, obviously, you're not going to drink water that looks like that, the chunky and the nasties in your water, right? But it's the stuff that you can't see in your water that is often really, really dangerous. That's the stuff that can make you very ill and in some cases kill you. I work with Multi-Pure Corporation, again, booth 509, and we get reports every day about what's happening in water throughout the world. And it just breaks my heart every day. People are dying because of what's in their water. And it's so easily remedied by simply using a water filter. We're going to talk about some water filtration methods that you can use and in an everyday setting as well as in an emergency setting, if you're quarantining in your home, as well as if you're evacuated. Let's talk about some of those fun little nasties in your water. This class is everything you wanted to know about water, but we're afraid to ask, or something like that. All right, let's talk about some waterborne pathogens. Oh, and maybe before I say this, let me tell you, President Obama recently had a cancer research panel do some research on what's in our water, what's in the infrastructure that's carrying the water to your home, and what were the results. Did anybody pay attention to that or hear about that? This was a big deal for a president of the United States of America to admit to the public that there are carcinogens in our public water. That's not good news. Part of it is the water treatment, but most of it is in this aging infrastructure that's carrying lead and other things right into your home and out of your faucet. Some of those things might include protozoa, bacteria, and viruses. Let's talk about protozoa. Let's talk about protozoa. How often do you hear that, right? Well, here you are. Protozoa, some things that fall in that category are things like Cryptosporidium, Giardia. Those you've probably heard of, right? Often associated with public swimming pools in the summertime. They're small, but they're relatively large enough to filter out. And of course, Multi-Pure Corporation can filter both of those things out of your water. Woohoo! Let's hear it for Multi-Pure. Thanks, good. A little more enthusiasm next time, a little more sincerity too. All right, how about bacteria? Let's talk about bacteria. We've got salmonella, cholera, E. coli, Legionnaire's disease, things that are not that fun to have in your water, right? They're smaller and they're a little bit harder to filter out, but there are filters that can do the job, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then we've got viruses. Let's talk about viruses. Things like hepatitis, Norwalk virus, polio, rotavirus. These are the smallest of all, and boiling some chemicals and purifiers can kill these viruses. Thankfully, we don't have a whole lot of this going on, but we do have some of this going on, and it could even show up in your drinking water. So we do need to address it. So where do these pests and microorganisms come from? Anybody know? The answer is not pleasant. Basically, water can become tainted by human or animal feces. Essentially, anywhere there is contact with human life or animal life is where you get the presence of those types of fun things in your water. And we don't consider them an added bonus, by the way. Just in dead bodies, I guess that could end up in your water as well. None of that's good stuff. What is the impact? Abdominal cramps, nausea, fatigue, diarrhea. None of this sounds very good, right? I like this next one, though, weight loss. Unfortunately, it's usually accompanied by all of the above. So again, not a good thing. And then in some cases, there's also death. Again, not a pretty list. But let's talk about some other waterborne things. We've got sharks to contend with. Well, maybe not so much in your tap. There's also giant squids in your water. Well, okay, maybe not in your tap. And then there's pirates in the water. But again, probably not in your tap water. So let's move on to more serious, real things, such as pesticides and herbicides. Now, while those things are good for your crops generally, help them grow, they're not so good for your body, as well as the pharmaceuticals that are ending up in our water, right? You might be taking some kind of a medication that's good for you, But then if you toss it down the sink or down the toilet, the neighbor down the street who might have a compromised immune system or be pregnant or young children, that can do a real number on their little bodies. So this kind of stuff, this is my little joke here, can turn you, somebody who looks like this, into maybe somebody who looks like that. All right, just kidding. But it is tricky stuff, and what the effect that it has is that it's poisonous to your body. So we want to get that out. How many of you know the story of Andersonville in Georgia? Oh, a few hands. Good. My husband's ancestor actually was in Andersonville prison as a prisoner during the Civil War. Now, he didn't die from a gunshot wound or anything dramatic like that. Sadly enough, he actually died because of the water. What happened, I'll use my little fancy schmancy pointer, the soldiers were upstream using the water for drinking and bathing, as well as their horses and, adding various fun things to the water. And then the prisoners were downstream. Again, most of them were just captured prisoners, but they were drinking the leftover water from the soldiers upstream, and many of them died. What a terrible way to go as well. So we can prevent that kind of stuff. And your municipality does try to prevent that. They simply add chlorine or maybe chloramine to your water with the intent of trying to kill that bacteria, kill stuff, all the nasties in your water. So is that a good thing? Yay! Well, it does kill some stuff, but do you want to drink it? No. It's like drinking your swimming pool water. It's been treated with chlorine and all the chemicals and stuff. So while that does kill some things, you don't want to be drinking it. Even more scary is that there are byproducts that are created that are carcinogenic, just like President Obama's cancer research panel found in the water. So this is a few little pictures here of water treatments and how they process in their plants. And I'll show you another little picture here in another time. The treatment makes water safe for people to drink because water is a good solvent. It picks up all sorts of natural pollutants. In nature, water's not always clean enough for people to drink. When the microscope was first invented in the 1850s, germs could be seen in the water for the first time. In 1902, Belgium was the first country to use chlorine to treat water or to treat water in a public water supply. Today, almost every city in the world treats their water. We're grateful for that. Treatment includes disinfection with chlorine or other chemicals to kill any germs in the water. And we're going to talk about how you can disinfect and filter your water, again, on an everyday application as well as during an emergency. So here's kind of a fun little graph. Fun. I guess that term is in the eyes of the beholder or something like that. Anyway, this is a little picture that kind of shows maybe what's happening in your city. Your city is collecting water from a source, that's their intake, and it's going to follow a little pattern where it gets through a little section where it will be mixed with maybe lime and alum. Some chemical additives will go through the process. It'll go through layers of various sedimentation, then on through coagulation and flocculation, then through filtration, come down, whoops, I skipped one, whoop, right, there we go. Here's where chlorine or perhaps chloramine might be added. And then this is your storage or your holding tank for your treatment facility. Okay, and you're all saying, why do I need to know this? Because you're going to follow the same pattern in an emergency setting, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. The water may be really great at this point, but then we end up in the distribution. That's the pipe system that carries that water to your house. And as I mentioned before, the water may be great until it hits the pipes, and then it might be picking up all kinds of other contaminants. So let's talk about price of water as well. How much water do you all spend on bottled water? I mean, how much money do you spend on bottled water? Anybody? No? How much? $40 a month? Dun, dun, dun. That is way too much money. We, Multi-Pure, booth 509, actually can get you water for 8 cents a gallon. And it's a higher quality than what might be coming in your bottled water. For those of you, and don't raise your hands because you're going to embarrass yourselves. For those, I'm just kidding. For those of you who might be using bottled water, for everyday use, go to a website that I like called EWG.org. That stands for the Environmental Working Group. And what you can find is a scorecard. It's like a grading sheet, and it'll give you a report card grade on your favorite brand of bottled water. Most people's eyes are opened, and sometimes they're horrified by what they see. What is in your bottle might be filtered water, or it could be tap water in a bottle. I don't know. So you'll have to go check out the website, EWG.org. Really, really great website. Really great resources for water and all that kind of stuff. So if you're buying bottled water for everyday use, you're spending too much money. However, while I hate the plastic and all of that, I do recommend bottled water for emergency water storage. And I'm going to show you some different kinds of containers for water storage containers, and one of those is water bottles. So not for everyday use, and I'll tell you again a little bit more why. You know, in an emergency like during Hurricane Katrina, the price of bottled water went up to $15 a gallon. Ridiculous? Yes. Did people spend the money on it? Yes. When there's no water, you'll spend the money, right? So by all means, store water, and I'll show you a couple different ways to do that. Here's an interesting quote by Gordon Michael Scallion of the Matrix Institute. He once said, "In the future, there will be a time when water may be worth more than gold." During Hurricane Katrina or the Southeast Asian tsunami or any of those disasters, the pictures that I showed you, people are willing to spend that money. That water is worth more than gold because water means life. Tap water is on average 500 times cheaper than bottled water. And I've actually seen that number drop as low as 400 times and actually up as 900 times. In other words, it's a lot more money than you need to be spending. So how much water do we typically use in a day? Anybody know? What do you think? How many gallons? How many do you think? 800? 300? A bazillion per person. Yeah. 1 gallon per day per person. In an emergency setting, yeah, but right now, like if you could go home, take a shower, drink some water, 55 gallons, all right. Under normal circumstances, we use about 140 gallons per day. 140. That's for drinking, bathing, laundry, doing the dishes, watering the yard, cleaning, right? That's a lot of water. So what are the guidelines for rationing water in an emergency? What do you think? Yeah. Well, yeah, you could save bottled water. Now, should you ration it? Well, according to FEMA, Red Cross, U.S. Department of Agriculture, they say do not ration water in an emergency. That's almost counterintuitive, isn't it? Because in an emergency, we kind of tend to ration everything, right? Why do they say that? I'll tell you. If supplies run low, they say never ration water because you need to drink the amount you need today and try to find the amount that you need tomorrow. You can minimize the amount of water your body needs by reducing activity and staying cool. Well, while that may be, an official quote, is it practical? In an emergency, won't we pretty much look like this? Ah! You know, burning up all kinds of water, or heat, right? Right? We'll be all stressed out and you'll be drinking water and yeah. So we try to ration, but it's going to be really hard. So how much water do we need? The gentleman in the back said about 1 gallon a day. Yeah, now I've seen different numbers. The suggested amount is about 3 gallons. Now remember, we were using 140. So do you think your habits are going to change or need to change in a disaster setting? Yeah, you're not going to be able to just bathe and drink and all the stuff that you want to do. 3 gallons is for just survival. Now, of course, you're going to need more in a hot, dry climate. I live in Las Vegas, baby, and so we recommend a lot more water there. Also more if you have children, nursing mothers, elderly, people with compromised immune systems as well. So how much water do I need? You can find all kinds of graphs like this online. They're give or take, it's a bunch of water, right? The bottom line is just store water. You need water. So let's talk about how to store water. Here are some pictures of some options, and they all have pros and cons. There are some things that are better and worse about them. So I'm going to show you a few of them. How many of you guys have these 55-gallon drums? Anybody? Yeah, we love them. They're really great. The pros are that they store a lot of water. I love that the outside is that dark blue, so you're not getting sunlight coming in, causing algae or any other things to grow. The cons, the negative thing is, they're doggone big and heavy, right? So let me show you how you want to fill one of these things up. And I do recommend these, actually. First, what you're going to do is place that barrel where you want to store it. That's probably the most important thing I could tell you, because these things are heavy. You're going to open up the cap, get a little bung wrench. Sometimes you can buy them and they come with those little bung wrenches. Open them up, fill the barrel halfway with a garden hose. And by the way, they have special garden hoses specifically for filling these things with water that are supposed to be clean. You can spend the money, that's great. If you don't, just fill it all up with your doggone water garden hose, that's fine. You're going to treat it, it's going to be okay. If you drink dirt in a disaster, that's better than drinking a lot of other things. So just fill it up about halfway, and then you're going to add some kind of a water preserver. What cracks me up is that water preserver has an expiration date. Does that seem like an oxymoron or something to you? Anyway, throw in some water preserver, and we'll talk about a couple of different preservatives. Well, I'll tell you now, might as well. You can use certainly Clorox bleach, any kind of a bleach. Katadyn tablets, they have special water preservers. I saw a booth that was selling water preservers. That stuff's really good too. When you're done, fill up the rest of the barrel, keep about 2 inches from the top, reseal the cap with the bung wrench. Now, a couple of other things I wanted to point out, you may already know this probably, is that you don't want to store these barrels directly on concrete. Most of us have these things in our garages. I don't recommend storing them on the outside. Of course, I live in Vegas, so, we get boiling water if we store water in barrels outside. So most of us have them in our garage. So just put some slats of wood underneath and stick it on that. Avoid storing the barrel in direct sunlight. That'll heat up the water. It could create little things happening in your water, as well as evaporation if your lid's not screwed on tight enough. And then also, don't store that water barrel package with the pump in it. And I'll show you a picture of what that pump looks like. Let's see. The most important thing, again, is that these things are heavy. Water weighs about 8 pounds per gallon. Those are 55-gallon drums, so you do the math. How much is it? How many pounds does that weigh? 450 pounds. Finally, something that weighs more than me. Yeah, that's a lot of weight. So when you get one of these big barrels, make sure you've got one of those pumps. And again, don't store the barrel with the pump in it. Keep it separate. Partly is because you get some evaporation if that's in there. And then you can use these little spigots as well. We have these really handy-dandy emergency water filters that have a gravity flow. So again, check out booth 509 and we can show you how those things work. There's the water hose. Sometimes those special water hoses are green. Most of the time I've seen them, they're white. All right, then we've got 15-gallon drums. Those are great. I think that they're a little bit more manageable, not as heavy. That has some of the same pros and cons. I do like those a lot. And then these two are good, the 5-gallon barrels. These are much more manageable for evacuation. Obviously, if you're in quarantine, there's been a biological weapon go off, and you've got that 55-gallon drum in your home, you're good, right? But what if you have to be evacuated? You can't pick that thing up. So these 5-gallon barrels are really great. The only negative that I see with these is that you have, well, maybe two negatives. You have to have a bunch of them. But then also I've seen sometimes they have these seams around them, and they sometimes can leak. So as soon as you buy one, fill it up with water. If it leaks, race back to the store and replace it before your return policy expires. But otherwise, I really like these things. All right, and then we've got that bottled water. Again, I don't like these for everyday use. There are also chemicals that they're finding that leach out of that plastic into the water. So that's another reason why I really don't like them. But for emergency preparedness, go for it. We also have water bags. Anybody have any of these? Couple things I don't like about these is that they're usually clear plastic, and if they're exposed to sunlight, then you might end up getting an algae type of a problem. The plastic can often be permeable. If you're storing it in your garage, you may have gasoline or paint fumes that could actually end up in your water. And then probably the most obvious is that it's really easily punctured. They're breakable. But I've also seen these sold in cardboard boxes those make it a little bit better. So, but they're 1 gallon, so they're easier to carry in an evacuation setting. Now, these things I really like. These are aqua boxes. Anybody have these? You also can buy them in pouches, like those little Mylar Capri Sun pouches. I like those a lot. One of the things I really like about them is that they have this really great laminate that prevents any source contamination from penetrating. A negative is that they're fairly expensive, but I would definitely throw some into my 72-hour kit to have some instant water. They're small, so they fit in your 72-hour kit. All right. Now we've got some lovely pictures of some creatures that may live in your water. But a lot of those kinds of, if you're storing correctly, you're bacteria-free and you're bug-free, that's great. But how many of you have ever taken water out that had been stored for maybe a year or 2 or 5, and then you taste it and it tastes a little flat? Do you know how to oxygenate it? Does anybody know how to do that? Yeah? What do? Yeah, you just pour some in 1 cup, pour it in another cup, pour it in another cup, and you're basically just tossing air back and forth into the water. So it oxygenates and it tastes a little better. So there you go. Now, what if you're quarantined in your home? Again, there's maybe a biological war, I don't know, or your neighbors are just driving you nuts and you're staying hidden in your house. So there are some great hidden water sources in your home. So let's talk about these real quick. Hot water tank, pipes, ice cubes, the reservoir tank of the toilet, not the bowl, unless you're totally going to die unless you drink it. And swimming pool. People always ask me, can I drink from my swimming pool? The answer is yes and no. So we'll get to that in a minute. Let's start off with the water tank. How much is in your hot water tank? Usually between 30 and 75 gallons. Somewhere between 40 and 50. Okay, there you go. So how do you use the water tank? Like you're going to remember this in a disaster. You'll find this information online, but it's actually really simple. First, you're going to turn off the gas or the electricity. You're going to open the drain at the bottom of the tank, turn off the water intake valve, turn on a hot water faucet in the home, and then do not turn on the gas or the electricity while the tank is still empty. All right, I'm going to show you another comparable type of procedure to pull water out of your pipes. First, you're going to let air into the plumbing by turning on the faucet in your house at the highest level. If you have a 2-story, 3-story, 9-story, you know, whatever. Works at a hotel as well. A small amount of water will trickle out. Then obtain water from the lowest faucet in the house. Get that? Again, you can find all kinds of instructions on the website. But there's water. The point is that there is water in your home. And in a true disaster setting, you can pull water out of your house. So there you go. Now, one of the important things that you need to know is where the location is of your incoming water valve. You'll need to shut it off to stop contaminated water from entering your home if you hear reports of broken water or sewage lines. Again, I told you I work for Multi-Peer Corporation, and every day I get reports in on what's going on around the world, and even just here in our country. This year alone, we got reports from major water main breaks in Boston. Do you remember hearing about that? The phones were ringing off the hook at our company, people saying, what do I do? What do I do? And then it's happened in other cities as well. But if you get a report, you know, that the water has been compromised and you need to shut off that water, know where to shut that water off. And then that's where you're going to be using maybe the water that's trapped inside your home. Okay, so let's talk about the swimming pool. Who has a swimming pool here? Not as many pools here in Utah, a few. In Vegas, that was like the bare minimum. When we decided we were going to move to Vegas, I told my husband, I don't even care what the house looks like, but it needs to have a swimming pool if I'm going to live in the middle of the desert. So anyway, we have a swimming pool. All right, so what do you think? How many gallons of water do you think? Oh, I just gave it away. In your swimming pool. Of course, depends on the size of your pool, but 18 to 20,000 gallons of water, right? Is that drinkable? Well, okay, this next one cracks me up. It says that 30 gallons per day for a family of 5, this would last nearly 2 years. Yay! All right. Now, in a true disaster, if you have gotten to the point where you are dipping into your pool for water, do you think it's going to last 2 years? No. Why? Because all your neighbors for the next square mile are also going to be wanting to tap into your swimming pool, if that is the community water source. Of course, this doesn't even take into consideration evaporation. However, it is a really good water source. What I would use it first before I even thought about drinking is bathing, washing clothes, you know, that kind of stuff. And then if I finally got to the desperation that that was my drinking water, then there's some things that you need to do. Basically, a pool is chemical soup, right? There's a lot of stuff going on in that pool. So you're never, ever going to just drink straight out of that. You're going to need to do some treating. Oh, there we go. All right, so remember these two things. Before you drink any water, whether it's the swimming pool or a river or a lake or someplace where you've evacuated and you've found some water, you want to disinfect it and then you want to filter it or clarify, disinfect, however words that you remember. So I always say disinfect. I should change this. Disinfect and filter. All right, so how do you do that? Well, let's talk about it in everyday setting as well as emergency. Let's see. Let's talk about disinfecting, first of all. Well, here are some choices. You can boil the water, and I'll give you some more little pictures here in a minute. You can add Clorox. Whoop! What happened? Junior just knocked over the table here. And then we've got Catadin tablets or, again, some kind of a disinfectant, right? Oh, and these little tablets too. Even if you don't have a swimming pool, you can go to the swimming pool supply store or Walmart, for crying out loud, and buy those big tablets. And those will work. Those are great. And then I would definitely throw those into your storage. Now for filtering, even if you don't drink coffee, coffee filters are really, really good for filtering. So is a bandana, so is your clothing, so is anything that you can find to create a layer to filter out water. And then, of course, if you're lucky enough, you can get one of these big camping, or they're not big, they're small, one of those little camping hand pump types of filters as well. Okay, let's talk more specifically about disinfection, boiling, distillation, water filters, purifiers, oxidant purifiers, UV light. Is this class fascinating or what? Well, what, I guess. All right, so let's talk about disinfecting. You can use household bleach, and that's what I recommend because it's the least expensive by far. But you only need to use regular liquid bleach that contains 5.25% sodium hypochlorite. What you don't want to use are the scented bleaches, the color-safe bleaches, or bleaches that have extra additive cleansers and whatnot, okay? And what you want to do is add about 8 drops per gallon of water, or 1/8 of a teaspoon. I've also seen this number change a little bit. If you don't have a dropper or a teaspoon, then just start pouring some Clorox in there. I mean, that's complete desperation. Try to stick to this formula if you can. And if the water does not have a slight bleach odor, repeat the dosage and let stand for another 15 minutes. And letting it stand before you drink it is important. It is a gas, somewhat, that you pour the liquid in, and some of those little gases will evaporate a little bit. So you need to let it sit. The Red Cross, FEMA, and the Department of Agriculture do not recommend iodine or other water treatment products sold in camping and surplus stores. I've read a lot of negative things about iodine. If that's all you had, again, that's better than nothing. But I think the bleach does the trick. Another way to disinfect is by boiling. Bring it to a rolling boil for about 3 to 5 minutes. Some of that water is going to evaporate. There's a way to capture that I'll show you in a minute. Boiled water will taste better if you put oxygen back into it. Remember how we talked about mixing it? That's after you boil it. It kind of brings it to life. And then for every 1,000 feet of elevation, you need to add an extra minute of boiling. So here in Utah, you're probably going to be closer to 5 to 7 minutes. And when in doubt, boil it another, 10 minutes. I don't know. All right, now, how about boiling and disinfection? It'll kill most microbes, but it will not remove other contaminants such as heavy metals, salts, and other chemicals. If you're boiling, you'll start to see that little minerals and salts will actually end up at the bottom of your pot, and that's good. You can keep them there. Just dip out the top part of the water, put that through the filter, and then you can throw away those minerals and those other things. So before treating, let suspended particles settle to the bottom or strain them through layers of paper towels and cloths. How about distilled water? Have any of you talked to anybody, or maybe any of you do drink distilled water? Anybody? Do you? Sometimes a doctor will recommend that you drink distilled water depending on what your medical condition is of your body. It's not recommended, however, for a long period of time. Why? Several reasons, but the main reason is your body needs minerals. That's one of the reasons why I don't like reverse osmosis water filters, is that it strips out the minerals, the good minerals that your body needs. But If your water is really, really nasty, here's a way to kind of clarify it and get some of the cleaner water. So you're going to boil the water. Wow, this is kind of a long, convoluted thing. Here, let me show you another picture. How do you do that? This is a terrible picture, but it kind of makes the point across. You're going to fill a pot halfway with water, and then you're going to tie a cup right there to the handle on the pot's lid so that the cup hangs right side up when the lid is upside down. Make sure that cup does not drip down into the water, otherwise you're defeating the whole purpose. Then you're going to boil the water for 20 minutes, and what happens is that steam will raise up, it'll hit the top of that lid there, and then the vapors will fall down into the cup, creating liquid water, and that is clean, distilled water. There you go. So that seems like a lot of work. It's easier to just sort of boil it, throw in some Clorox, and do that, I think. But whatever. UV light. This is a really neat technology. It neutralizes pathogens of almost all sizes. There's also oxidant purifiers. And I'm trying to remember if I saw any of the vendors today selling these. Some of these are really great for backpacking types of applications. It's a recent technology. All right, water filters. Woo! There's one of Multi-Pure Corporation's water filter. That's one that we call an Aquadome. It's our least expensive. Sits on top of the counter. Really great if you're renting. Great for campers, you know, that are taking their RV or something like that. It just literally screws right onto the faucet and filters water right through. We have under-the-counter applications that also filter water, obviously, and they have their own little faucet that comes out. We don't sell this, but this is a really neat little camping filter, perfect for your 72-hour kit. 3 letters that you need to remember, probably, if you can remember anything out of all of this, is when you're looking for a filter, look for the letters NSF. That's your protection as a consumer. They kind of work as a protection, as a consumer watchdog. What they do is they will certify whether or not a water filter company really does what it says it does. There are a lot of false claims going on out there. So if someone says, we can remove 99.99 you know, up to the umpteenth time, say, oh, really? Let me see your NSF certification that proves that. Oftentimes the answer you'll get is, well, what's NSF? That's when you walk away and talk to somebody else. NSF is a really great protection for you, like I said. And they have different standards. One standard is for companies that can reduce taste and odor, basically. And most companies, most filters can do that. Then they have a more difficult certification to get. That means that you're not adding things to the water, but you literally are taking bad contaminants out of the water. You can go to nsf.org's website and learn more about it and why it's so important. Multi-Pure, of course, has the highest NSF rating. We also have been given the Consumer Digest Best Buy Award, so we're really proud of that. And by the way, Multi-Pure is celebrating our 40th anniversary next month. Woohoo! Let's hear for Multi-Pure. Really? That's the best you can do? All right, let's move on. Here are a few different other kinds of filters, ceramic filters, and of course I'm biased, but our solid block carbon technology is the most efficient and the most effective. These, again, have some pros and cons. Some of the ceramic ones, for example, add silver, or they have a silver element to it. I know in Japan, for example, they want silver in their water filtration systems. Here in the United States, it has been banned. They don't want silver because they have negative health effects. We also have glass fiber. Well, Multi-Pure doesn't have glass fibers. I don't like these as much. Iodinated resin, you'll see a lot of these. They're neat because they're portable. They're not quite as effective. Charcoal filters, you'll find those everywhere, right? A lot of times when I ask people, oh, do you have a water filter? They'll say, yeah, I have this thing. And they tell me the name of the company. And while that seems convenient enough and it's portable, unfortunately, it's a granulated carbon. What that means is if you put a bunch of granules of carbon in a cup and stuck your finger in, what would happen? Your finger would displace the little carbon granules, right? That's what the water does. It just pushes right through those and brings all the contaminants along with it. Granular carbon is pretty effective for reducing chlorine odor taste, but not for reducing contaminants that are of health concern, right? So you want a solid carbon block. And again, not all carbon is even created equal. We use a carbon that's derived from a coconut husk type of a carbon, which has been proven to be the most safe for your body. Reverse osmosis. I think somebody went through Las Vegas, my town, and just sold everybody an RO system, and everybody thinks it's great. Several things I don't like about RO is that I mentioned before, it strips out all of the minerals. It's also really clunky. It takes up a lot of space, and girls, we need our cabinet space, right? But more important than that, it takes 3 to 4 gallons of water, basically to make 1 gallon of their clean water. That's really wasteful, and I think especially in the desert, we just don't have a whole lot of extra water to spare. So, and it's also expensive. You've got to replace filters and membranes and all kinds of these tanks and little cartridges, so it can be rather expensive. So I don't necessarily recommend those. Water ionizers are hugely popular right now. Anybody have these? They're really, really expensive. And while they supposedly raise the pH in the water, they don't filter the water. So if you're all about raising the pH, changing the alkalinity of your water, that's great. Just add a filter before you do that. And we can hook you up with that. Our filters are easily adaptable to that. All right, so there's ours. There's our carbon block solid technology. It removes chemicals like herbicides, MTBEs, PCBs, pesticides, cysts, spores, cryptosporidium, giardia, stuff I can't pronounce. It removes the widest range of contaminants, and we're really proud of that. And of course, it also improves taste by removing chlorine and iodine. I always tell people, if you don't use a water filter, your body is the water filter. Here's an example. Our filters start out looking white, and then this is what they look like, or can look like, after about a year. It's a little deceiving. Your filter could still be collecting all kinds of junk, and even if it doesn't turn brown, it still is collecting stuff. So the color doesn't necessarily mean that you're not collecting anything. But we have customers of ours that show us their filters after a year, you know, depending on where they live in the country, and it's pretty nasty. We have a really terrific emergency preparedness backpack. It comes with all this stuff, and I know there are a lot of vendors here that are selling emergency backpacks, which is great. One thing, and probably the most important thing in that backpack, is your water source. So in the backpack that we sell, we have little miniature water cartridges that work on a siphon type of a method. It's gravity activated. There's no batteries or anything like that. You just kind of get a little siphon going by sucking on one end. Put that little cartridge into your water source, and then just let it flow into your clean container. Normally, these things retail for about $45 with the tubing and all of that. In this backpack, you get all of this stuff and 2 of these for $99. I think that's a smoking hot deal. So if you're interested in one of those, what booth do you go to? That's right, number 509, Multi-Pure. All right, on to some others. I know I saw a vendor selling these little SteriPens. These things are pretty cool, awesome for backpackers. It uses a UV type of a technology. The negative is that it requires batteries, so you got to make sure you've got batteries that are ready to go in your 72-hour kit. Then we've got all kinds of backpacking, hiking filters that are pretty cool. UV purifiers, I think I saw some of those also back there. Also really great for backpacking. Again, usually requires batteries. This one requires 4 AA batteries. Anyway, kind of interesting technology. It's kind of fun to play around with, but kind of expensive. Did you see the price tag on that one? All right, now, if we have time, I have no idea. I'm just going to keep talking until they boot me off the stage. This is kind of hilarious. I've got sons that are really into wilderness survival and how to actually gather water out of the wilderness. And this little paragraph, I won't even read it, but basically describes, you know, walking through the forest in your clothing in the morning when the dew is on the leaves, and then wringing out those pants, and it'll collect water. And, you know, that's like when, you know, man versus survivor, or what are those TV shows? Survivor Man, Man versus Wild. Anybody seen Dual Survivor? They do this kind of stuff, which is actually Good stuff to have. Knowledge will save you. But I don't know how. Hopefully, we may never have to use this. This is a picture that I wanted to show you. Now, what if you don't have a filter in your 72-hour kit? You're evacuated tomorrow. You got to race out there, and then you've got to create your own filtration. Remember at the very beginning when I showed you a power plant or a water treatment plant and all the different layers and the levels and the process that it went through? That's what you want to duplicate. So you could get a plastic bag, you could get a shirt sleeve and tie it up, you could get a soda pop bottle, whatever you can find, buckets, whatever, and create some sedimentation. You'd be putting your water in at the top, and then you'd be layering it with rocks and sand, and ultimately, hopefully, you could find charcoal or some type of a carbon at the very bottom, and you could actually create your own filter in an emergency setting. Here's another picture. This would be kind of a fun Boy Scout project. Get some of those soda pop bottles and make some of these. The opening, obviously, the top has to have an opening, but again, you've got layers of gravel, sand, charcoal, and then at the bottom it could be cheesecloth or fabric or anything that you can find, to kind of control that flow. But I think that's kind of handy dandy. Good stuff to know in an emergency. And hopefully we never have to use any of this emergency information. Here's some really neat, clever applications that somebody put together in their backyard where they got those big 55-gallon tanks. Notice they're sitting on top of the wood, the slats. And then they've got the water coming off of their gutters, and they've got this downspout. Anyway, I don't know. That's for people who've got a heck of a lot of time. But here's another one that's pretty neat. A lot of vendors today are selling big buckets of food, or look at that one. I bought that one. I love that. The buckets, and it's got the little porta potty seat in it. Yeah. But look what you can also do with that bucket. You can layer buckets, and again, put in rocks and sand and, all of that kind of stuff. And then at the bottom, put in one of those little spouts, and there's your filter. I think that's kind of cool. Again, this is not for everyday use. We've got easier stuff than this, just buying our filters. But in an emergency, you can get very creative and come up with some of this. Again, here's another one of man versus wild types of settings where you've got, bending bamboo over and having the water drip out. I don't even know. Does bamboo grow here? Doesn't grow in Las Vegas, that's for sure. But again, good to know in case you end up in, Vietnam or something. No, here's also water sources inside plants. Again, you'll have to get very, very creative. I've got all kinds of silly, how to create water stills and all that kind of stuff. If you're interested, I can send you a copy of this presentation in a PDF. You can go to multipeer.com. There's our phone number. You can call me, ask for Trina. You could go to my website, sisterthrifty.com or boicebox.com, and just send me an email and just ask if you can have this PowerPoint presentation. You can spend a lot more time looking at how you can create some of these below ground stills and all this kind of stuff. This is pretty fancy stuff. Let's see if I can advance through some of this. And again, I'm hoping we never, ever have to use this. But what's interesting is it does tell you about some of the supplies that you would want to have, like some plastic sheeting or tubing or buckets. Those are some things definitely that you want to include in your 72-hour kit. Oh, here's a quick quiz. I'm just going to keep talking. Let's see. More prizes. Or you already saw the answer to this one. Water contracts. It gets smaller when it freezes. Is that true or false? The answer is false. Can you see that? Actually, water expands. It gets less dense when it freezes, which is unusual for liquids. Think ice. It's one of the few items that floats as a solid. If it didn't, then lakes would freeze from the bottom up. That would mean we'd have to wear wetsuits when ice skating. And some lakes way up north would be permanent blocks of ice. Here's another question. Water has a high surface tension. True or false? True. The answer is true. Water has the highest surface tension among common liquids. Mercury's higher. Surface tension is the ability of a substance to stick to itself or cohere. That's why water forms drops, and also when you look at the glass of water, the water rises where it touches the glass, the meniscus. Plants are happy that water has a high surface tension because they use capillary action to draw water from the ground up through their roots and stems. How about condensation in water? Condensation is water coming out of the air. True or false? Answer is true, of course. This is actually true. Water that forms on the outside of a cold glass or on the inside of a window in winter is liquid water condensing from water vapor in the air. Water contains water vapor or humidity, right? In cold air, water vapor condenses faster than it evaporates. So when the warm air touches the outside of your cold glass, the air next to the glass gets chilled, and some of the water in that air turns from water vapor to tiny liquid water droplets. Clouds in the sky, and the cloud you see when you exhale on a cold day are condensed water vapor particles. Is this stuff fascinating or what? Well, what, I guess. You want another one? All right. More things can be dissolved in sulfuric acid than in water. True or false? False. The answer is false. You guys are good. You need a prize. You need to come to my booth, 509, and come get a prize. This is not true. Sulfuric acid might be able to dissolve a car, but water isn't known as the universal solvent for nothing. It can dissolve more substances than any other liquid. This is lucky for us. What if the sugar in your salt drink ended up as a pile at the bottom of the glass? Nasty. The water you see in rivers, lakes, and the ocean may look clear, but it actually contains many dissolved elements and minerals. And because these elements are dissolved, they can easily move with water over the surface of the earth. Oh, there's more. But wait, there's more. Rainwater is the purest form of water. True or false? What's that? Compared to what, he asks. The answer is false. I'll tell you why. Actually, distilled water is purer. Remember, because it stripped out the minerals. Do we want the minerals in our water? Yeah, we definitely want that stuff. All right, here's another one. It takes more energy to heat water at room temperature to 212 Fahrenheit than it does to change 212 Fahrenheit water to steam. True or false? Answer is, false. First, water is at boiling temperature 212 Fahrenheit at sea level. It's not really the same as boiling water. Oh, it's a trick question. When water first reaches boiling, it has not begun to turn to steam yet. More energy is needed to begin turning the boiling liquid water into gaseous water vapor. The bonds holding water molecules as a liquid are not easily broken. It takes about 7 times as much energy to turn boiling water into steam as it does to heat water at room temperature to boiling. All right, is this stuff important to know? Yeah, probably not. Here, we can skip this one. How many more of these do I have? I don't even remember how many I made. Okay, am I getting the timeout button? No, they're still letting me talk. And you guys are enjoying letting your feet rest, right? The wives are off shopping. Okay, I just got the 5-minute. I don't think I even have. Oh, this is kind of an interesting one. Raindrops are tear-shaped. True or false? What do you think? False. When you think of a drop of falling water, you probably think it looks like a tear. When a drop of water comes out of a faucet, yes, it does have a tear shape. That's because the back end of the water drop sticks to the water still in the faucet until it can't hold on anymore. But using high-speed cameras, scientists have found that falling raindrops look more like a small hamburger bun. Gravity and surface tension come into play here. As rain falls, the air below the drop pushes up from the bottom, causing the drop to flatten out somewhat. The strong surface tension of water holds the drop together, resulting in a bun shape, minus the sesame seeds. Fascinating stuff, I tell you. All right, okay. Let me keep going. All right, does anybody have any questions as I try to find my last slide here? Or did you just learn everything about water now? Pretty much, right? Question. Good question. Really good question. She asks, what about fluoride? Whoop, I guess maybe that was the end. Fluoride is a really controversial element in water. Some municipalities put it in the water intentionally because they think it's good for your body. Somebody told me today that, was it a year or so ago, that in Utah they mandated that water be put in? Is that true? Somebody told me that. Yes, no, yes, yes. And so apparently the municipalities here are convinced that it's good for you. When I had a baby, my first baby, my doctor gave me fluoride drops and had me give them to my baby because supposedly it would help with his teeth. You know, and I'm the obedient mother. I'm giving my child fluoride drops. There are, on the opposite end of the spectrum, there are municipalities that say, no, fluoride is bad for your water. So it's kind of a personal thing. As you research it and decide whether or not you want to drink it, there are filters that can remove it and reduce it. So you just have to decide if you want it in your water or not. I personally don't. So that's me. Anybody else? Any other questions? So how many multi-pure filters would you like to buy? All right, well, go ahead and visit us over at booth 509 when you're done. And we've got a special prize for each of you for coming to visit. And we'll give you more spiel about how our water filters work. Thank you so much for sitting through this presentation. I hope you learned a thing or two. If you're super thirsty, we'll also give you something to drink over there. Booth 509, Multi-Pure Corporation. You can also find us at multipure.com. So thanks for coming. We'll buy you a drink.